Hey guys, welcome to the Alt-Shift-X livestream for episode 3 of season 7 of Game of Thrones, The Queen's Justice. And yeah, for those folks in the chat asking, this stream usually goes for like around 40-ish minutes, give or take. We'll see how it goes. But as last week, the basic idea is that we're going to go over the episode talking about some of the more interesting bits, and we're especially going to focus on stuff that isn't the obvious stuff, some of the more peripheral stuff, some of the stuff that may or may not make it into the video, some of the stuff I'm still thinking about, so that way this won't just be like a repetition of what's going to be in the video anyway, and also it means that you guys have an opportunity for input. So we do have that Reddit thread in the description of the video, where you can go and add questions and comments and upvote them and downvote them, and I'll respond to the top voted ones, so that way we get a bit of that hashtag interactivity, right? Fun. Hello everybody in the chat. Let's begin with this episode. So the episode began with the landing on Dragonstone, and for one little side thing, I thought it was kind of interesting that Jon, who is a king in the show, is landing here on Dragonstone, and so this scene was, in a sense, a king's landing, which is kind of fun. But one of the little side things I wanted to talk about with this scene, with Jon's first landing on Dragonstone, was Missandei and her talking about her homeland of Narth, or Davos talking about Narth. Because we do know a little bit about Narth from some of the World Book and some of the side little tidbits that we pick up. And Narth is like I know that the children of the forest have been described as hippies, but Narth are like twice as much hippies, because they're not only like pacifists, but they're also like vegetarians, and they only eat fruit and not flesh, and their god is called the Harmony Lord, and they really like butterflies, and there's some quite interesting fluff about Narth to talk about. Like there's the fact that their butterflies seem to carry this disease, which kills any invaders to the island of Narth. So the people of Narth themselves are harmless and pacifists, but their butterflies protect them through some kind of disease. I think that's an interesting little bit of side stuff about Narth that might be interesting to briefly mention in the video. Also, like in the books, Daenerys swears to Missandei that she will bring her home to Narth, because Missandei and some of her brothers were, of course, taken as slaves from that island. And Daenerys at one point pledges to take Missandei back home. And Missandei figures she doesn't really want to go back home because she likes being with Daenerys, but I thought that was an interesting sort of counterpoint to what's happening in the show. Because, of course, in the show, Missandei is a very different character. They've aged her up to be an adult, whereas in the books she's like 10 or 11 years old, and she's an actual, proper, capable political advisor, and all that. Very different character to the books. And of course, in the books there are some wacky theories about Missandei secretly being a faceless man, which is probably insanity. But I don't know, it's interesting to compare show Missandei to book Missandei, so might do a little bit of that in the video. One of the other super interesting bits about this beginning of the episode was this conversation between Melisandre and Varys, two of the most mysterious characters in the series, probably the most, honestly. And we get this revelation that Melisandre is leaving, that she's going to Volantis, just when things are getting serious, just when big things are happening. Melisandre's leaving the country, which seems like a bizarre thing to do to me, because she could be so useful here, because, she's someone who can literally foretell the future by looking into the flames, and she is someone who knows a lot about the prophecy of the prince that was promised, which is, happening now. It seems really important right now, so it seems very strange for Melisandre to just leave like this. I wonder if part of the reason why she's leaving is that she's worried that Davos and Jon will be a bit unhappy about the Shireen burning situation and might execute her or something. But Melisandre drops this prediction to Varys saying that, I will come back to Westeros because I will die here in Westeros, and so will you, Varys. We both will die in this strange land. So she alludes to this interesting similarity between Varys and Melisandre in that they both are foreigners. Varys is from Lys, and Melisandre is from, where's she from? Like a Shy? She's from far, far away. And they both are these foreigners who have come to serve lords and kings in Westeros. And apparently they are both doomed to die here. I wonder if Melisandre might be killed by Arya somehow. Because remember, seasons ago, Melisandre said that she will meet Arya again. So I wonder if maybe Arya will kill Melisandre in some kind of situation. And I wonder if that might relate to the idea of Nissa, the whole story of Azor Ahai sacrificing his wife to make Lightbringer his burning sword. So maybe it'll be Jon Snow who does it, who will kill Melisandre with Longclaw and thus fulfill the Azor Ahai prophecy. I think that could make sense as the end for Melisandre's story. Although, yeah, again, the whole leaving off to Volantis thing, why do that now? It seems weird. Patron Miriam suggests that maybe she's going to Volantis to meet up with some other Red Priestesses and bring them to Westeros to help. And, I think that's possible because, we have been introduced to Red Priestesses in Volantis before. Makes sense that she might do something with them. But I suspect that the only reason why they name Volantis is that, they're just sending her away. And Volantis is the foreign city. It is away, and that's why she's going there. I don't know if it'll be anything deeper or more complex than that. But either way, yeah, this whole conversation was definitely intriguing between Melisandre and Varys, and we'll definitely be talking a bunch about that. And one of the other super big things that happened, obviously, was the meeting between Daenerys and Jon, one of the most anticipated moments in A Song of Ice and Fire, if not, recent fiction. The two protagonists coming together. And I thought this was handled quite well. Because there are a lot of ways that this could have been done badly. I think if they immediately got along, that would have sucked. If they immediately started getting romantically interested, that would have sucked. I think what they did here is that they clashed. I think that these are two protagonists. These are people who are used to succeeding. These are people who are used to getting their way. And when two such people come together, they butt heads. They're as stubborn as each other. They're like an immovable object and an unstoppable force. So I thought it was really cool the way Jon and Dany just sort of butted heads like this. But, despite being one of the most momentous moments in the series, I don't think there's actually all that much to even say about it. I think it more or less made sense. Both of their strategic positions basically made sense. But there certainly were little tidbits to sort of pick at. Like, I thought it was a bit dubious when Daenerys said that, the Targaryen dynasty was so legitimate because, the Targaryen dynasty provided centuries of peace and prosperity to Westeros. Which seems to omit, the Dance of the Dragons, and the Blackfire Rebellions, and all of the terrible, destructive wars that the Targaryen dynasty brought to Westeros. I think that statement's questionable. Kelly Theobald thinks that the scene was a bit drawn out, and Skip E agrees. Yeah, it probably was a bit long. And in some ways it didn't quite flow. Like, there's one bit where, like, Jon Snow's like, wow, it sure is important that we fight the White Walkers. And then Dany goes on this weird monologue about how she has, like, faith in Daenerys Targaryen and stuff, which just didn't really sort of connect in terms of the order of the scene. I wonder if there was some weird editing there or something. But I thought overall it was basically done fairly well, and I think most importantly, the actual sort of strategic political positions of the two characters actually made sense, which is something that the show should not forget. So yeah, I thought that scene was pretty good, and then we cut over to King's Landing, where Euron is arriving to these crowds of adoring fans, which I think was kind of bizarre, because Euron Greyjoy is an Ironborn raider, and maybe the people of King's Landing aren't as familiar with the Ironborn as, say, the Westerlands people are, or the Northmen, but like I think generally speaking, people aren't big fans of the Ironborn. And they're also probably not big fans of King's Landing, because according to Hot Pie, it's kind of like it's openly acknowledged or known that Cersei blew up the Great Sept with all of those hundreds of lords in there, or hundreds of highborn people, and the Pope. So it seems pretty weird that everyone's so like unanimously in support of Euron and King's Landing and stuff. So that seemed a bit weird. I'm also not sure how I feel about Euron using the word twat. I do appreciate that they're giving Euron a different sort of a vibe, and he's got a different character in this season of the show, which I think is probably a good thing. But like his use, his language, like when he's talking about fingers in bums and twats and things, like he seems like some British bloke. I don't know how I feel about Euron being like that. But another important part of Euron's arrival in King's Landing was his interactions with Jaime. So they're setting up this really clear rivalry between the two. So I think some people were asking in the Reddit, how might Jaime eventually leave Cersei? I think possibly this rivalry with Euron might become the breaking point. Because in the books we have this whole sort of Riverlands thing where Jaime is thinking about trying to make himself a better person and all of that sort of internal monologue stuff, which is kind of harder to do in the show. But in the show I could quite easily see the romantic relationship with Cersei being sort of the breaking point. They certainly emphasized their sexual relationship in this episode. And stuff, and so I think if Cersei did end up having a sexual relationship with Euron, that might finally be the breaking point for Jaime. Maybe. There's a bunch of different ways it could go. Alternatively, he could just get really upset by her cruel behavior. But if her blowing up the Sept of Baelor and her abhorrent torture of the Sand Snakes, if none of that is sufficient to make Jaime snap, then I don't know what will in terms of like torture and cruelty. I think Jaime will rationalize away any amount of her cruelty, as he did in the scene with Olenna in this episode, when he was saying that, he was basically saying that the means justify the ends, and no one cares how many people Cersei kills and tortures along the way, as long as we get to our goal of her ruling the kingdoms, and it'll be great. That's what he says in the scene with Olenna, and I think that demonstrates that Jaime will rationalize any of her misdeeds because he loves her. But maybe if that love was threatened by her cheating on him, or maybe if he found out about Lancel, though I don't think they'll do that in the show, maybe that will be what matters. Because in the books as well, he was really upset by the cheating thing, thinking about Lancel and Osney Kettleblack and Moonboy as well. So maybe Cersei's infidelity will be what changes things for Jaime. Brian Castillo suggests that Euron would cut Jaime to pieces in a fight. I think that's probably true of show Euron, because show Euron does seem to be pretty formidable in battle. But of course, book Euron we haven't seen fighting physically. And yes, Skip E suggests that the Valancourt thing will happen for sure. Yeah, it was pretty pointed when Olenna tells Jaime that Cersei will be the death of you. I think that definitely is in accordance with the Valancourt theories of Cersei and Jaime dying together. And yeah, so then there was a scene with Cersei and the Sand Snakes, and yeah, I thought that was done well. I think that was what that scene should have been. I think there was a lot of emotion in it. I think there would have been a lot more emotion in it. I think it would have been a lot more impactful if Tyene Sand and Ilaria Sand were characters who the audience liked, which I'm not entirely sure is true. Tyene especially, we've had maybe 5 scenes total with Tyene in them, and I don't know if we've really had the time to sort of bond with Tyene or sort of sympathize with her. The Sand Snakes have always been pretty one-note characters, which I think means that this scene was less impactful than it could have been. If this scene was including characters who have been with forever and who have cared about like Arya, and like Cersei, then and Jaime and people like those, then we would have. I think this could have been a real like gut punch of a scene. But because they were just sort of these side characters, spending this much time on their death almost felt like a waste. But I think generally it was a fairly good scene. And then Jaime and Cersei have sex, and I think there's an opportunity for some kind of a one-liner in here about how Cersei likes her sand snakes dead and her consent dubious, or something like that. Because Jaime says no as Cersei starts making out with him and as they begin to have sex, which is interesting. I almost wonder if that's related to, there was that scene in season 4 where Jaime seemed to rape Cersei, and there was quite a lot of controversy over that. I wonder if the showrunners thought that, well, maybe if they show Jaime saying no as they're having sex, then maybe that tries to demonstrate that like dubious consent is just like a part of Jaime and Cersei's relationship, for better or worse. That incident in season 4 wasn't like this weird one-off shock event, that it was maybe more like just part of the character of their sexual relationship. I don't know if that makes it better or worse, but maybe they're just trying to explore or justify that relationship a bit further. Personally, I feel like we've had enough Jaime and Cersei sex scenes at this point, and I feel like, I don't know, that there should only be more of them if they're serving a narrative purpose. I suppose in this case it is demonstrating that, Cersei came to Jaime's room right after torturing Ilaria and Tyene, so they're demonstrating that Cersei is so turned on, for lack of a better phrase, by other people's suffering and by torture, and so it demonstrates, how much of an awful person she is. But I think we already know that, so I don't know to what extent that's, I don't know, a useful scene. But it makes sense. It works, I suppose. We'll see how it develops. And then we get the scene with this bloke from the Iron Bank, which is one of the most mysterious and shadowy institutions in a world full of mysterious and shadowy institutions. There were a lot of people complaining about how it's kind of weird that Cersei implies that the Iron Bank supports the slave trade, given that the city of Braavos, where the Iron Bank is based, was built as an escape from slavery. So it seems weird that the Iron Bank would support it. And I think there's sort of 2 points to that. Like, firstly, the Iron Bank guy doesn't actually agree that the Iron Bank supports slavery. He just sort of lets Cersei assume that. So it's not necessarily true. But secondly, just because you live in a city that holds certain values doesn't mean that every single person and institution in that city also subscribes to those values, especially an institution like a bank, which tends to do things, spoiler, in terms of what's profitable, rather than what's necessarily ethical or in keeping with cultural values. So it wouldn't surprise me if the Iron Bank was supporting or was invested in the slave trade despite being in Braavos. And of course, something I want to talk about in the video is the possible relationship between the Iron Bank and the Faceless Man. There's lots of speculation that the two institutions are somehow connected, and I think that idea is only supported more when the Iron Bank guy here mentions that, sometimes to, keep stability, certain tragedies are necessary tragedies, which I think could connect to this idea of the Iron Bank using the Faceless Men as like enforcers or debt collectors or some kind of tool to support their power in Braavos. Maybe the Iron Bank has used the Faceless Men to arrange a tragedy or two when it's necessary for their financial well-being. I think that would make a lot of sense. And there's also the question of what the relationship between the Iron Bank and Cersei will be. I suppose we'll just have to keep watching. But yeah, I'm glad that they at least are continuing to include the Iron Bank, because it was really because they had such a surprisingly prominent role in the previous seasons. We showed Stannis and Davos actually going to the Iron Bank. and you know, Arya following Mace Tyrell outside the Iron Bank. So there was obviously a role to be had for the Iron Bank. And it's cool to see it continue in the show. In the books, of course, it'll probably be quite a big deal indeed, and maybe that's why it's got this large of a role in the show. But yeah, what a lot of people are speculating is that, you know, Cersei promises here that she'll pay back the Iron Bank all of the Lannisters' debts, and it seems as though the way she's doing that is by plundering Highgarden. So that sort of makes sense. So if she does manage to pay off that debt, then maybe she'll keep the Iron Bank on her side. But if she fails to get that gold to the Iron Bank, maybe that's where problems will arise. We'll see how it goes. Next scene is with Littlefinger. So in this episode, we got Littlefinger's full sort of monologue about him going on about, you know, don't fight in the east or the west, fight everywhere, always, know everything, be everywhere in your mind, man. And yeah, I don't think those lines make any more sense in their full version in this scene than they do just in the trailer. I didn't enjoy that monologue at all. I just don't think it has any substance in it. It's trying to sound all clever, but I don't think it really means anything. Like he says that, like, nothing will be a surprise to you if you just think all strategically in your head, but isn't that exactly what happened to Littlefinger? Like, he didn't know about the White Walkers, he didn't know about the Army of the Dead, but now he talks about them as though he acknowledges that they're there, as though they haven't, you know, thrown a giant spanner in his works, right? Littlefinger didn't know about the White Walkers, and surely it's thrown him off to not know about that in all of his scheming with, like, engineering the War of the Five Kings and stuff. And yet here he's talking about it as though, oh, it's all part of the plan, man. I've got it together. It's fine. I don't know if it actually is. But obviously the center of this scene was Sansa Stark, who was starting to assert herself, and she's getting all sassy to Littlefinger. And I thought that was fun to see. And yeah, I suppose we're continuing this plot of Sansa being swayed by Littlefinger and being, like, convinced over to his side, but it's so poorly communicated what that means for Sansa to be more on Littlefinger's side. What exactly is it that Littlefinger wants her to do? Seize power as sole queen in the north? Is that what Littlefinger wants? He doesn't express it, he doesn't say it, so it's so hard to know what the stakes are in this relationship between Littlefinger and Sansa. I think it's pretty disappointing the way that Littlefinger as a character has gone, and I'm surprised that he's still alive at this point, frankly. I think he's got to die soon, because he's just not going anywhere, and it's probably better if it ends sooner rather than later. One semi-interesting thing about Littlefinger's monologue, though, I thought, was, you know, the way he's talking about, you know, fight every battle, everywhere, always in your mind. I thought that was actually kind of an interesting counterpoint to Bran, because Bran's whole thing is his newfound omniscience. He says he knows everything that everyone does everywhere, which sounds really rather similar to what Littlefinger's talking about in terms of having that internal knowledge and connection to everything. Though I suppose the difference is that where Littlefinger sort of seems to claim or imply that he knows everything, Bran seemingly, apparently, actually does. So there is a difference there. But Bran has changed. Bran's personality is a bit weird in this scene, and it throws Sansa off, and I think it throws the audience off. And I think that is really good, because it shows in a really sort of concrete, directly acknowledged way that Bran, his personality has changed as a result of the things that he's gone through. Like, I've always thought it's kind of dumb the way, you know, Jon literally dies and is resurrected to little apparent effect to his personality or his way of thinking. Arya has joined a literal death cult and murdered a whole bunch of people as a young girl, and she doesn't seem to change a whole lot. I mean, she does a bit, and we are acknowledging that in this season, but it's not as much as I think it could be. Theon is really the only sort of major character who have really sort of explored and gotten into his trauma and his personality change and his way of thinking changing as a result of what he's experienced. But now we also have Bran. Bran is now another example of a character who has really seriously changed. In his case, because of his whole sort of magical transformative experience. He's now this weird sort of psychic hive mind character who sort of knows everything and as a result seems to struggle to relate to human beings, which, you know, would be expected of anyone who spent, you know, most of their adolescence in a tree with a wizard, I think. But he's also got that actual sort of deep neurological brain change, I think, as a result of the magic. So it's unsurprising that he would change. A lot of people are comparing his personality change to, like, Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen. I think even, like, you know, some of the darker moments of Doctor Who could sort of apply. Just this idea that when someone is so powerful and so knowledgeable, other human beings become like ants, and it's a lot harder to relate to them. And so I think we're experiencing that between Sansa and Bran, and I think that's really cool to see how these last seasons have actually changed relationship dynamics. And I wonder to what extent that'll also be true between Arya and Sansa. I thought the Nymeria scene last episode hinted at that and did that really well. But yeah, of course, the question is, like, what will Bran's role be now? He says he needs to talk to Jon, so I think it's pretty strongly foreshadowed that he will tell Jon about his birth, about Lyanna and Rhaegar, and no doubt we'll get more visions from Bran as well, so I think it'll be really interesting to see what's coming up from Bran. And then down in Old Town, we had Jorah healed from Grayscale. And this was kind of surprising, I thought, in the way that, you know, Grayscale, which is meant to be like this death sentence of a disease, is cured, by taking off the bad bits and putting an ointment underneath. In the old Shift X video, we said that, it was unclear what was used in the ointment. But in a behind-the-scenes photo of the book which Sam was reading, it looks as though the ingredients of the ointment were like, saps and barks and grasses or something, just sort of all natural, non-magical ingredients were what's in the salve. Whereas, that book that Sam was reading in the previous episode hinted that dragonglass might be related to the cure. So I don't know, it seems super weird that they're using something really sort of humdrum and a normal seeming procedure to cure this crazy disease. Because if it was that easy, you'd think that they would do it all the time. If Sam, this complete novice, can pull off this procedure, why don't they cure all of the people who have grayscale? Like, maybe Sam was just incredibly lucky, I guess. But it seems kind of lame that they saved Jorah from this, especially given that, John Connington in the books is, I think, one of the most interesting things about his character is that he has grayscale. He has this death sentence, which totally changes the way he looks at the world. He's willing to take any risk now if it means achieving his goals of supporting the son of Rhaegar Targaryen. That death sentence makes Jon Con interesting, and I think it could have made Jorah interesting in the same way, but now that they've taken the grayscale from him, it's kind of like, oh, alright, we've just undone that step in the character, and now he's just what he was before. What do we do with him now? What is Jorah's role going to be now? Is he just going to go back to Daenerys and help her fight? I don't know. That feels like a step backwards to me. I thought we were going somewhere interesting with Jorah having the grayscale, and now it seems reversed. And it's not even clear what sort of plot purpose, Sam and Jorah's relationship will have. Like, Sam didn't get Jorah to bring any essential information to Daenerys, or bring some sort of, Valyrian steel secret or dragonglass secret to Jon or Daenerys. Like, none of that happens. They just sort of shake hands and head off. Maybe their relationship will serve some later purpose further on, but I suppose we'll have to see. In the books, of course, it was Jorah Mormont's dying wish for Jorah to join the Night's Watch and take the Black. And I think that would be a plausible thing to happen in the show, maybe, for Jorah to get involved with the Night's Watch. But I mean, he said now that he was returning to Dany, so I guess we'll just have to see. But the conversation between Eberus and Sam, that reminded me a lot of, the obvious, the obvious Hogwarts connection. When Eberus pulls Sam up for having done the grayscale procedure, even though he wasn't meant to, but lets him get away with it. It's a lot like how Dumbledore is always pulling Harry out of, the Chamber of Secrets and going like, well, you broke all the rules, but I'm still going to make Gryffindor win the House Cup because you're the protagonist. And that's what they do with Sam. Although Eberus does get him to clean up all of these books, which you just know will contain some kind of super important secret. Sam has managed to stumble across so many super important secrets already in his short time at the Citadel, so no doubt he will find some more. I also enjoyed the mention of book mites in the book, some kind of flesh-eating Ghiblies in the books. I thought was kind of fun. Also kind of reminded me of that Doctor Who episode where the Vashna Narada are living in the books or something. Not sure why we are including this many Doctor Who references, but there you go. And then we have a scene, I think it's like Dumbledore and Harry. Although, there's one I haven't got a photo of, which is of the scene in between here with Daenerys and Tyrion chatting over the painted table of Dragonstone, where Dany's talking about, maybe I should use my dragons to scout. Like, maybe I should get on my dragon and fly around and, see where Euron's fleet is. Which, you probably should have thought of before, right? Like Euron's fleet managed to completely sneak up on the Sand Snakes and Yara, apparently, who are all, drinking and hanging out. They had no idea that Euron was there. Why would you not use your dragons to scout and to try to anticipate this sort of thing? It can't be all that hard to see Euron coming, given that it would take a long time to come all the way from the Iron Islands, right? And similarly, when Jaime in this episode unexpectedly suddenly turns up at Highgarden with his giant army, how did Dany not see that coming? Why not use her dragons to scout? Varys and Tyrion say that, it only takes one arrow to, kill you on top of your dragon if you're flying around scouting, but you can wear armor. Just she's the queen. Make some really dope plate armor for Daenerys while she's riding her dragon, so she's protected from arrows, and she can use her actual tactical advantage of having dragons. They talk about in Aegon's Conquest about how, Aegon's use of his dragons as scouts is one of the most useful parts of having dragons. So it seems a little bit BS that this doesn't happen in the show, but whatever. And finally we have this scene between Olenna and Jaime. And this was a really cool scene, and I think it was done really well. And there are a lot of little sort of tidbits about it that we can talk about. So there's the fact that we have Jaime's sword, which was once Joffrey's Widow's Wail, the Valyrian steel sword. This has been visible previously, but now we've got the first acknowledgement that he's now carrying that sword and what that could possibly mean. And as we mentioned before, Olenna mentions that Cersei will be the end of you, Jaime, and what that could mean for the Valonqua prophecy. But generally, this conversation was really cool, I thought, and an appropriate end for Olenna Tyrell. I like how she got her last barbs in at the end, because she is the Queen of Thorns, after all. So that was the episode. There was a lot going on in this episode, and there's a lot to talk about in the video. It'll probably be a relatively long one. But now that we've gone over the episode, I think we'll head to the Reddit thread and respond to the questions which you guys have posted. So first of all, Rege, I think that's how you pronounce your name. It's not Rike, it's Rege, I think. Asks about Jon's resurrection and why he's trying to keep it as a secret. Because there was that moment in the meeting with Dany when Davos is trying to list off Jon's resume and all of the cool shit he's done, and he sort of mentions that he takes a knife to the heart, but Jon silences him so he doesn't talk about the resurrection. And I think the reason why he doesn't want to talk about the resurrection is because he already looks like he's wearing a tinfoil hat, what with the talk of there are zombies coming to get us, there's Ice Hitler beyond the wall, he's already struggling to get Dany to believe that. Yeah, just like Spiderpool suggests on Reddit, it'll just be even harder to believe that he was resurrected. So I think it makes sense not to try and push that. But at the same time, like, you gotta sort of ask, when John's resurrection is this point that keeps getting sort of skipped over and played down, it's like, well, what was the point then of including it in the story? If John's resurrection is going to be just no big deal all story, what was the point of it happening? In the books, there's little doubt that John's personality will probably change pretty seriously and fundamentally after his resurrection. In the show, he's pretty much regular old John, which I think kind of sucks. But I mean, John. That said, John does use his resurrection as an advantage sometimes. Like we do see at Castle Black, Tormund says that the wildlings think John is some kind of god after his resurrection. So presumably some of the loyalty of the wildlings to John might be based in their knowledge of John's resurrection. So that is certainly him using his resurrection to his advantage. But I mean, that's kind of it in terms of impact of John's resurrection on the story. So yeah, I think it's questionable whether it should have been done this way in the show, and we can't wait to see how it goes down in the books. Blue Owls points out that there was that scene at Winterfell with Littlefinger when Sansa asks Maester Volcan to go and check through all the records of all the letters that Luwin received at Winterfell. Apparently there's a copy of every letter that's been received. And Littlefinger does have a little sort of like a bit of a double take when he hears this, that there are copies of all the letters at Winterfell, and maybe that could be significant. And indeed, as Cargyle on Reddit suggests, there is that letter from Littlefinger, from Lysa Arryn, to Catelyn, implicating the Lannisters in the death of Jon Arryn, which kind of caused the War of the Five Kings. And I think one possibility that people are talking about is the idea that maybe Maester Volcan will find the letter that Lysa sent, and then Sansa, if she saw it, could go, hang on a minute, I heard in the Eyrie that Lysa deliberately lied about the Lannisters under Littlefinger's orders, and I actually killed Jon Arryn. So maybe Sansa could use that letter as like evidence of Littlefinger's betrayal of the Starks and his attempts to turn the Lannisters against them, and therefore use that as a way to condemn Littlefinger in some way. Which maybe I could see that happening, but I think it's important to remember that, look, I don't think show watchers remember that stuff. I think a very small proportion of show watchers remember or care about the death of Jon Arryn, or even remember who Jon Arryn is, or even Lysa for that matter in a lot of cases. So I would be kind of surprised if they dredged up that plot point as a way of getting rid of Littlefinger, because I mean Sansa doesn't need that in order to know that Littlefinger is a manipulative, murderous prick. So I don't think she should need that letter. But I mean, yeah, it probably could work. And the nod in the show was a bit too obvious to mean nothing. There definitely was like a real moment where Littlefinger really double takes at the news that there's copies of all of Luwin's notes in Winterfell. Space Potato argues that Catelyn burned the letter, and that Luwin should know that it's too dangerous to copy down. Yeah, that's a really good point, I think. It wouldn't make a lot of sense for Luwin to copy down this obviously super sensitive secret letter which Catelyn clearly wanted destroyed. But I don't know, maybe they'll do it in the show anyway. Maybe it would just be like a record of like receiving the letter. Like it wouldn't be a copy of the letter itself. It would just be a note from Luwin saying like, "Oh, we received a raven from the Eyrie from Lysa," and he chooses not to say what the content is, but that might at least be enough to sort of, remind Sansa of those whole events or something. I don't know. There's a bunch of different ways it could go down, but I think there definitely will be some significance to that nod, to that look that Littlefinger has after hearing about those copies of those letters. Also on Reddit, GR Penn asks about Melisandre going to Volantis, and I think we sort of talked about that already. Jaime's character arc, we've talked about that. Rhaegar has a question about Alt Swift X. There will be another Alt Shift X episode coming out soon, I think. And Spiderpool asks, when the reveal of Jon's heritage is out, how will Dany react to the knowledge that Jon is now a Targaryen? Well, obviously, that is a threat to Daenerys, because as Daenerys goes on and on and on about, she considers herself the rightful heir to the Iron Throne as the daughter of the Mad King. But Jon is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen, a more direct heir. Jon would be ahead of Daenerys in the succession. So Jon would completely undermine Daenerys' like central tenet of her political legitimacy if it was revealed that Jon is a Targaryen. So that could definitely be a source of conflict. But that said, will Daenerys find out about Jon being a Targaryen? How would she find out? I mean, Bran could tell Jon, and he'd probably believe Bran, but would anyone else believe Bran? They would need some kind of tangible evidence, wouldn't they, before anyone believes that Jon is a Targaryen. It's also kind of interesting the way some of the Northmen in Winterfell were talking about how, you can't trust a Targaryen, you shouldn't go meet Dany, but that could also apply to Jon, right? Like, how are the Northmen going to feel about Jon if they find out that he's a Targaryen bastard, not a Stark bastard? I mean, both technically, but the son of a Targaryen man. So that could change things in a bunch of other ways. And yeah, there's also the question of, what would being a Targaryen mean to Jon? For a long time, there's been sort of the idea that Jon might take the Iron Throne as the son of Rhaegar Targaryen, which could maybe still happen. But I feel like, I don't know, will he go from King in the North to King of Westeros? Would that be a transition he would want to make? That anyone would want him to make? I don't know. So it's hard to say. But I am at least very excited for Jon to find out about his parentage once and for all, because it's been so long, so many years of people speculating about this, for Jon to actually have confirmation. And especially if we get to see Rhaegar, it would be amazing if we get to see Rhaegar in a vision this season, so that would be very exciting. And of course there is an Alt Shift X video on Rhaegar that has been sort of in the works, and I think will emerge sometime after season 7. The Anderblast suggests that they just do a paternity test on Jon. That would save everyone a lot of time if we had DNA testing in Westeros. So, I think that answers most of your questions. Oh, we did have some further questions from Mariam. Mariam raised the question of like the 3 heads of the dragon, and will there be like dragon riders for the 3 dragons of Daenerys? I'm pretty skeptical of whether this will be a thing in the show. I'm pretty skeptical of whether this is even a thing in the books. There's no point in the books or the show that anyone claims that the 3 heads of the dragon means that there will be 3 individuals that will ride 3 dragons. Like, there definitely is, the sort of historical parallel with Aegon Targaryen and his 2 sisters who rode their 3 dragons. But I don't think there's really much of a reason to believe that that's any kind of like necessary prophecy. I think it's definitely plausible that Jon might ride a dragon at some point. I think it's plausible that Tyrion might ride a dragon at some point, but it might not be this huge, important, prophetic thing. We'll see how it goes. But in the show especially, like, I don't think the 3 heads of the dragon as a phrase has even been used in the show, so I wouldn't be holding your breath for anything like that in the show. So I think that wraps this up. I think we've answered most of the questions. If you've got any more desperate questions, chuck them in the live chat, and I'll try and respond to you there. But I hope that you have enjoyed this video, this live stream. It's fun to do things in a different format sometimes. And of course, I'd like to thank everyone who's a supporter of Alt Shift X. If you hear it in the live stream, you're here because you're supporting Alt Shift X and you're making this whole channel possible. The Season 7 period is an insane, busy, crazy, chaotic time. and I'm really glad that you guys can be a part of it, and I'm really glad that you guys can help make it happen. Shira asks if Elena will come back as a talking white. Nothing would make me happier. Jeremy wants to talk about Euron Greyjoy's teleportation. I believe that Alden also mentioned that earlier in the live chat. It is kind of ridiculous, Euron's movement, because he not only built 1,000 ships at the Iron Islands and then sailed all the way over to King's Landing on the other side of the continent, and then he sailed all the way back to Castle Rock, which should take like months and months, if not years, to do all of those 3 things. Like, it's fine that the show plays it fast and loose with time most of the time. I think that's okay, but those journeys and that construction of ships should have taken so long. So yeah, I think that's bordering on the ridiculous, the quick movement of Euron Greyjoy. Then again, he does have wind sailing magic, so who knows? Why didn't Jaime tell Cersei about Olenna's confession? Ragnar Grinder asks. Well, he hasn't seen Cersei since. It was the last scene of the episode that Jaime found out about Joffrey's killing, Olenna's killing of Joffrey. So maybe we'll find out later. And Hairless Oyster asks if Swift can change his hair color like a cuttlefish. I didn't know cuttlefish could change their hair color. I didn't know cuttlefish had hair. You learn something every day from Hairless Oyster. Marine Biology 101 by Hairless Oyster. That is a YouTube channel that should exist. Alright, so I think that concludes this episode. Thank you all for joining in the stream. We will have this Season 7 Episode 3 explained video out for you as soon as possible. Last week, the Friday release was too late, I think. We did have some technical bullshit hiccups that sort of contributed to that. I think this time we're aiming for a Thursday release. As always, the goal is to make the best video possible. Release time be damned, basically, but I think Thursday is what we are aiming for and what we should achieve this week. So yeah, have a good one, and see you next week. Cheers.